Why don't project businesses know exactly what's going on in their projects? We hear this all the time from our customers. Their lack of project insight raises risk and costs and makes it difficult to run a profitable business. Today, I'll be talking with Henrik Lerkenfeld, our VP of Engineering, about project insight. Why don't companies have it? And how do we tackle this problem with Adeaca Project Business Automation? Let's talk project business. Hey, Henrik, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, Matt. Yourself?
Great. Good to talk to you again.
You too.
What we want to talk about today is really project insight, right? So knowing what's going on in your projects. We hear this all the time from our customers. They don't know what's going on in their projects, and that's a real problem for them. There's a real lack of knowledge about their business. And that's really troubling as far as being able to run their business effectively. So I guess to start off, why don't companies have, the right project insight? Why do they have trouble getting information about their projects and their business?
Well, I think a lot of it is down to lack of proper tools and system support. I don't think really in general, companies in the industry, they know very well what the metrics are they should be watching and what kind of KPIs they should be monitoring and generating on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. But if you don't have the proper tools and system support to generate these metrics for you to act on, it simply becomes something that is not getting done. So controls that should run every day or every week, they start running every month or maybe just when you finish up a project. And you can understand why, because if it takes you 3 hours to compile data and get ready to run a control and generate a KPI, you stop doing it because you don't have time. There's other things that needs to get done as well. So I think at the core, it's simply a question of not having the right tools to support the process.
Right. That makes sense. So when you dive in a little bit deeper into the different project insight that these companies are looking for, customers tell me all the time that they have a hard time knowing whether or not they're on budget. That's probably the biggest issue I've seen is that the financial part of it. So I've even had one customer tell me that they didn't know if they made money on a project until well after the project was complete, and they sent out all the invoices. So what are the different KPIs in Adeaca PBA that we can generate so businesses know they're on budget?
Yeah, you're right. It's I guess there's one of the two big ones in terms of are we doing well within our project is certainly the budget side of things. Are we able to deliver the project at the cost that we use for our initial margin calculations? And I think a good way to kind of look at these metrics is to have a look at what we call the project sensor point view in the Adeaca solution here. So this here is a page that really lists a whole range of KPIs. So we call them sensor points. That's really kind of somewhat tied into the kind of the color scheme here, where it's very easy to see if things are going well. Those are the green ones, or the not so well, the yellow ones are already getting critical, which would be any red flags that are showing up in here.
Right.
So if we talk about the budget side and let's say just overall the financial performance, I think there are two KPIs that stand out above any else, which is the variance. So essentially, are we looking to complete our project within the cost budget that we originally set out, or the cost budget that's currently in play, including any kind of variations and other things that might have happened along the way. And then there's the margin there. So we call it EAC margin, but it's really is the margin. So what is the profit outlook at the end of this engagement? So those would be two very critical things to look at if you want to make sure that you stay on track financially with your project. And I think these are some of the things that many companies are not really able to stay on top of these metrics throughout the project. And really, it's often something that's done as an afterthought. So, okay, we've done the contract. How did we do? And that's really not where you want to be. But of course, underlying these KPIs and everything else really is a lot of additional details. So if you want to just have a quick peek at that, we can try and open up the costing sheet for this project here. Because this is where this information is driven from. So you can see my variance here of 0.4% over budget. But now I can begin to analyze that data within the context of my cost breakdown structure, how I've defined my project. And I can see I'm over budget for sketches and I'm under budget for project management, for instance. So one thing is the KPI, but obviously there's a lot goes on behind the scenes in order to actually generate those KPIs. Also, when we talk about kind of project metrics in general, earned value is certainly something that keeps popping up. And for the cost side, we would be looking at the CPI, the Cost Performance Index. And likewise, on the scheduling side, we have the Schedule Performance Index. So these are essentially metrics that are telling us or answering the two basic questions within projects. Are we within budget, and are we on time? Are we on schedule?
Right. Okay. So I think a follow-up to that is these metrics, like obviously great to have, and we provide a system and a tool for that. Are they real time? Like how does is this timely information?
Yeah, so that's a very good point as well. So one of the underlying kind of functions of the SensorPoint system is this real-time and quite automatically updated and generated. So all the metrics that we're looking at here is based on the most recent information that resides within the system. And because the system is kind of a holistic system that includes operational components as well as financial and procurement and many other things, we are able to generate this wide array of KPIs on a real-time basis. So again, coming back to my original point of when you don't have system support and you have to go and dig around and spend a lot of time generating these metrics, you stop doing it. But if you just get them presented like this, all you have to do is open up a form and look at the flags that are thrown at you, no effort required, right? Then you begin to really reap the benefits of having KPIs, because now you can have those metrics throughout the life cycle of the project, and you can react and you can mitigate according to the KPIs that are presented to you.
Right. Okay. And so this is like, if you look on the left-hand side, that's your projects, and so this would kind of be like a project manager view of their projects, for example, right?
That's correct. So these would be my 11 projects that I manage, and these are my KPIs for my set of projects. Another user would get another listing of projects depending on that person's portfolio or however we kind of divide up the projects.
Right, right. And then we've got obviously the traffic system, red light, yellow light, green light. So that makes sense. And then we've got a number underneath, it looks like, and that is a trend.
Correct. That's the trending. In this case, the trend baseline is last month, but it could be yesterday as well, depending on your settings. So essentially, it's telling you if a particular sense point is trending upwards or downwards according to, or in comparison to the previous data set.
Right. Okay. So you can look at it at any time period. Nice.
Correct.
Okay. So, we talked a little bit about the financials. So what about the schedule? How can KPIs in Adeaca PBA really help companies stay on schedule?
Right. So schedule is, again, there's probably a few central KPIs that we can point towards that kind of explains our ability or our projected ability to meet deadlines on the project. So for instance, the slack indicator is a direct reference to a milestone with a deadline. And the slack essentially tells us how much time we have between the estimated completion of the milestone and the deadline of that milestone. But of course, underlying the slack is a lot of other components. So, for instance, if you are overloading your capacities, or you have resource conflicts, or you haven't done your staffing yet, you still need to assign people. These are all uncertainties that exists within the operational plan. And so once it gets to actually getting the work done, if you're in conflict and someone else is competing for the same resources, then the delay might happen at that time. So it's not just the slack itself, which is very simple KPI, it's just looking at what is the current outlook in terms of meeting a deadline, but it also is looking at the underlying variables that might affect that slack over time. So if you're overloading by 50%, there's a very high chance that you're going to get delay at some point. You may not have it yet, but there's a good chance you'll get it.
Right.
So slack, one of them. Overload is whether or not we're booking above capacity limits. Resource conflicts is whether or not the people we've assigned are actually double booked in conflict with this particular project. And resourcing required tells us if there are any kind of immediately or imminently starting activities that have not yet been staffed, so we haven't actually assigned people to that project work yet. So those are some of the very central either direct KPIs kind of speaking to our ability to meet deadlines, but also the variables that might change that perception over time. And again, if I may just drill into the planning view, which is really, this is the work breakdown structure in the schedule. So this is kind of where those KPIs are coming from, right? Mm-hmm. And one of them is actually fairly easy to illustrate if I filter on my milestones here. These are the milestones in my project, and the deadlines are the small dots here. So whenever the deadline is red, it means that we actually already in violation of that deadline on the schedule, right? So this looks like 3 of my deadlines are fine. The last 2 kind of seem to be at risk, just looking at this simple view here.
Right.
But as I said, there are many other things that might change this over time. Materials, for instance, we have a different view that I can try and take here called supply chain. And again, we're using the color coding. You can see this one here. I actually have a material problem because some components I need are coming in here, but the schedule is starting 2 weeks ahead of that time, right? So if these are materials I absolutely need in order to do this activity, then this is going to generate a delay. It might not be there yet, but it will because the materials are coming in late, unless I can somehow renegotiate and get a quicker delivery.
Right.
So it's just an example of these variables that are underlying the kind of the higher level KPIs, which is the slack. But underneath that, you have some indicators that might tell you that the slack might look okay, but actually, based on the underlying variables, it's unlikely to stay that way.
Right. So it's giving you a warning sign before it actually materializes.
Correct. Early warning, that early detection, which is sort of key in projects in general, and also an important element of a KPI. It's the ability to draw your attention to something that may not have materialized yet. Like in this case, it's an expected late delivery on a purchase order. But by us knowing it early, we might have time to source for it elsewhere, or realign the project, or find an alternative component, or whatever our options may be. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then, so what about resources, right? So resource utilization, because that's obviously one of the biggest things for project-based companies. So how do they use Adeaca PBA KPIs to make sure they're using their resources efficiently?
Yeah, that's right. So it does depend on the industry. Some kind of project companies are more sensitive towards resources than others. Some are more material heavy, but it is very true that in general, the ability to load balance your resources, whether that be machinery or equipment or human resources, is very central to project industries in general.
Yeah.
And we've already touched on some of them, like resource conflicts, overloading capacity, the lack of actually staffing your projects with resources. So those are all kind of indicators that this is for a particular project, right? So it's telling me that, hey, on your project, you've assigned people, but you have 6 conflicts. So in 6 cases, these people you've assigned to your project are actually double booked for other engagements at the same time, right? That's a huge problem potentially. So again, if we just dive back into the planning view that we were in just before, if I just change this to look at our resourcing status, it's again going to be very apparent. Like here, we've got these red indicators. That tells these are conflicts. Essentially, the system is telling me that this task is at risk because it's in conflict. We're double booking our resources. The purple ones are activities that I haven't staffed yet, which is also a problem because maybe the reason I didn't assign someone to do project management is because I couldn't find one who was available. So that is also a kind of a utilization or a load balancing risk or potential risk on the project.
Right.
But of course, there's also the broader view on utilization and bookings in general. So if we look at, for instance, our capacity overview, this is telling me kind of in a histogram kind of view what are my capacity limits. So if I want to look at my factory workers, for instance, you can see here that in October, I'm actually extending my overall capacity for factory work being done in my workshop. Right? And this is cross projects. So these are all the projects that exist in my system and all the capacity requirements from those projects summarized up in my overall need for, in this case, factory workers or project engineers or whatever capacity entities that I might need to manage. So this can be used also to look into the future, of course. So maybe I'm looking at the next 6 months and I can see I'm okay now, but in January, I'm going to be needing 10 more engineers, right? That's going to show up as a kind of a gap between my available capacity and the expected capacity requirements going forward.
Got it. Okay.
Another view that does sort of the same thing, resource availability, we call this one. This is more of a, let me just change this to 21. This is more of a grid calendar view for individual resources. So here you can see for each of my, again, this is a group of people. I'm responsible maybe for these 10 people. And for the month of August, I can see that, for instance, Sarah is double booked on these particular dates. This is the availability here. So minus 12 means that I'm booking 20 hours on an 8-hour day. Right? So this immediately tells me where I might have some issues. I can see maybe Ted has some time, Jody is overbooked, so maybe I need to reshuffle some work around.
Right.
I can also drill into the exact assignment. So this is how that overload is generating, coming from different projects, of course, and then contributing to an overall load against the resource.
Okay, so that's a particular person's schedule. You can see where the particular project that is maybe booking that's getting her overloaded.
Yeah. So again, the resolutions here: you find another resource who has time to do the job, delay the project, or shuffle stuff around. You know, there are different avenues for resolving.
But at least you know ahead of time.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the key point. So I guess then, you know, when you look at these KPIs overall, I mean, obviously they're great, and we talked about how a lot of companies don't even have these types of KPIs, or they kind of skip doing them because they're too difficult to do. You got to bring in data from everywhere. So I guess my next question is, what's behind these numbers? So like, are we just, you know, pulling these data manually and, you know, it's the same thing? And like the people are going to have a lot of work and the same amount of people and the same amount of resources just tied to trying to pull numbers together? Or so what's happening behind the scenes here?
Yeah, so there's no doubt that any company, if you put enough time and effort into it, you can generate these KPIs in an Excel sheet or something, or on the back of a napkin. You can absolutely do that. The problem probably in many cases would be that can you then trust the metrics that you end up generating, right? So if someone's sitting manually and pulling stuff into Excel and manipulating it and applying formulas and ending up with a number, how trustworthy is that number they end up with? And one of the key differentiators for a PBA solution like the Adeaca here is that we have managed processes underlying all these KPIs. So when I look at my activity backlog, right, task late, start late, finish, these are my activity backlogs. These are explaining me that there are activities that should have started, but they haven't started yet. This is coming from the schedule, from the work breakdown structure, which is in the same system and which is a governed process in itself. When I look at the variance, it's coming from the costing sheet where I do my estimate complete numbers. Again, it's a managed process, potentially subject to an approval workflow as well. But the point is, nothing is just generated out of thin air. Everything here is generated on the back of a managed process inside of the Adeaca PBA solution. So to me, that is one of the big differentiators. Not only that there's so much automation and efficiency in the solution that you actually get these KPIs for free. You don't have to do anything to get them, just do the underlying processes. But also that they are trustworthy numbers because the processes that generated these KPIs are managed inside of the system. They don't reside in desktop Excel sheets or whatever kind of custom applications that could have been used to generate these numbers.
Right. So in a sense, if you don't see any data here, then really it's just the actual process behind that's not getting done.
Yeah, I mean, that could certainly be. Sometimes you could have a red flag because the process hasn't been done behind the KPI. So the KPI is saying, "Hey, what can I do?"
Right.
If the work hasn't been done, I can't generate metrics for you.
Yeah. Right. So if the work is being done underneath, then these things will show up, and you'll know what's going on.
Yes, correct.
Right. Okay. Well, this has been great, Henrik. Thank you for speaking with me. I'm sure we'll get into more details about these managed processes in another talk, and I look forward to that as well.
So do I.
All right. We'll talk later.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
Lots of great content there on Project Insight. You got to see a good bit of our solution, Project Business Automation. So in summary, here's what I took from that talk with Henrik. 1, Project Insight is critical to running a stable and profitable project business. 2, your project KPIs need to cover both the financial and the operational side of your projects. 3, that insight needs to be in real time. Otherwise, you won't have time to correct for issues that are brought to your attention, and it's just reporting after the fact. 4, your project KPIs should be derived from an underlying managed and controlled process. You can't have people just making up their own numbers for those KPIs. And 5, the only way to accomplish the above 4 in reality is to have a completely integrated business system that manages your project business processes from end to end. And that is Project Business Automation. I hope you enjoyed this talk on Project Business. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get notices when we release new talks, and go to Adeaca.com for lots more great content on Project Business, and sign up for our newsletter. Until the next time we talk Project Business, thanks for watching.